Elon's takeover of Twitter was the most important thing that's happened to civilization probably in the last 100 years. If it wasn't for him, Trump wouldn't have won. Like he literally, you know that meme where the car is like going this way and then it kind of like skids off to the right? Like that's what civilization just did. And I think that can be pinpointed to the point where Elon decided to grow some balls and actually take that on and allow for the collision of ideas. And it just so happened that there was a lot of a collision of ideas among Bitcoiners on Twitter. So I don't know if it's a purely Bitcoin phenomenon. I have a feeling it's got more to do with Twitter.
But are you saying that started happening since Elon bought Twitter? Or was that
it started happening before, obviously. It started happening before. But now that Elon's done it in general to Twitter, the communities I'm a part of on Twitter now, like I don't give a fuck about the Bitcoin community, honestly. Like the quality of discourse on the Bitcoin community on Twitter is very low in comparison to the new groups that I found. Way more vitality, way more energy, way more intellect, way more strength, way more courage. Like all I see in the Bitcoin community is fucking people bitching about number go up and who they're angry at and fucking lolbertarians and shit like that. Exactly, it's all fucking gay, honestly. So I don't know. That's why I'm a little bit skeptical on that. I don't think Bitcoin necessarily. It's an ingredient because it does lower your time preference, and ideally, with a lower time preference, you change your behavior. That's really what time preference is. It's a behavioral thing. That being said, I think that Bitcoin attracts people with a predisposition for a lower time preference. So I think you have to have those ingredients beforehand. Bitcoin also attracts losers and degenerates and all that sort of stuff. And you see that all of those guys become shitcoiners, morons, NGU junkies and all that sort of stuff. But there's something about Twitter and that kind of public square discourse that I think had a greater impact. And if you just infuse the Bitcoin element in there, we found our way to those ideas because of that discourse.
So speaking from my own personal journey, right, I can kind of see that, right? One of my biggest gripes with Bitcoiners in the past has been this idea that just because Bitcoin exists, everything's going to be all right.
Correct. Yeah.
And I always felt like, no, we actually have to act, right? We have to build the world that we want to see. And Bitcoin simply by itself is not going to change anything. What happens when you become rich off of Bitcoin, but you haven't really leveled up as a person, right? What do you do with all that wealth?
Yes.
It's just going to amplify all those negative qualities that you have. And so I kind of see what you're going with that, right? And I see the time preference shift in me happen, but it's happening gradually over time, where my plans have gone from 3 months out to 6 months out to a year to now 10-year projects, but it took a lot of, wrestling with the idea of spending my Bitcoin and always going through that kind of deliberation in your mind of, do I spend a Bitcoin now? Because if I spend it now, it's going to be worth more in the future. And over time, your mindset just shifts to a lower time preference.
Totally. I was talking about this with someone the other day. We were talking about how spending your Bitcoin is often like, by people, they're like, oh, you shouldn't do it, this and that. But I mean, look, in order to build a better future, you need to invest, right? And when I look at, so my last company that I built, Amber, which was the first dollar cost averaging app in the world for Bitcoin only. Man, I probably put 10, 15, 20 Bitcoin into that stupid thing in the beginning because, Bitcoin was around $1,000 at the time or $2,000 or $3,000, whatever it was, right? So I invested a bunch of my money. I'm never going to see that fucking Bitcoin back. Like if I'm lucky, I might make 5 Bitcoin back out of the 20 I spent, right? But building that company opened up doors to the Bitcoin community, to Max and Stacy, to, Ross Stevens writing my fucking foreword, to Michael Saylor, to like, it opened up doors that would never have been opened up before. So in my mind, that's far more valuable than I stacked another 10 Bitcoin. Congratulations, right? Like you need to, like, it takes time to build a monetary stack, but you know what also takes time? To build a reputation. And money alone can't buy your reputation. That's something that I think has been lost in the modern world. I have a whole chapter in the book on this, is that what can money not buy specifically? And it's honor and reputation. And this is something like man, it reminds me of the sort of Japanese culture when the West first came to Japan. There was this whole, the West came to trade, and the Japanese kind of looked down on trade as something that was reserved for the merchant class. And in Japanese feudal society, the merchant class was below the peasants, because merchants were generally the people who just traded anything, and they would trade honor, they would trade promises, they would trade anything for silver, right? Whereas the samurai, they considered money and trade below them.
So this book, the Bushido book, Bitcoin, is it kind of a calling to Bitcoiners to revive their warrior spirit?
Yeah, 100%. I think the archetype that has been lost in civilization over the last 150 years has been the warrior. And a lot of that, I mean, we can go into conspiracy theories, but I don't want to. But, World War I, World War II was an attempt to wipe out as much of that as possible, right? And what's replaced the warrior is the soldier. And the warrior and the soldier are two different kind of people, right? The warrior is the one who defends, protects, conquers, claims. The soldier is the one who follows orders. Now, granted, many soldiers have a warrior spirit, but they've been turned into pawns for a meat grinder. And I mean, part of that is a function of how technology's evolved, how society's evolved, how the state's evolved, central banking. There's many reasons. There's no sort of like one clear cut, this is why it happened. And it's not all conspiracy. Much of it is, the transformation of civilization. But the warrior archetype, or the blood of the warrior, lives inside a number of us. Those of us who have a predisposition to want to fight or to want to stand up. Like if you were someone who during the corona scam was being told to put your mask on and you actively put it down and fucking spat in their face. Like, I mean, I got arrested on 4 fucking planes because I refused under any circumstances to put a fucking mask on. So if you were one of those, you probably have some sort of warrior blood in you, right? So for me, this is an attempt to rekindle that. This book's gonna piss more people off than I think it'll inspire. But that's fine, because I want to separate from those people, and I want to make a calling to those, to the ones that will hear this message, to the ones that this book was written for, essentially. So yes, it's a calling to those. And I made it Bushido of Bitcoin, not because all of those people are going to be Bitcoiners, but because Bitcoiners are probably going to be socioeconomically extremely influential. And hopefully I can talk to the Bitcoiners who have that warrior blood in them, to remind them that, hey, there's something more than just how much money you have and how many sats you've stacked. There's these other things that matter.
Is it more likely that the warrior class that emerges now, right, that rekindles that spirit, is it more likely that it emerges from the Bitcoin space just because Bitcoin naturally selects for those type of personalities?
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, because in fact, I've found more courageous warriors outside of Bitcoin than I have inside, at least in the last year and a half while I've been outside of Bitcoin. I don't know if that's changed. Now, there is definitely bright spots, like you guys. There's, Lex, Bitcoin Mechanic, Francis, like, John Ballas. Like, I've got a couple. I've probably got like 20 people who I would be confident, for example, if the goblins and the fucking orcs were coming, I'd be like, all right, I got these boys with me, right? But in the other spaces that I've been digging, I found like probably 50. Like, so the ratio is higher elsewhere. And what I'm interested now, and that's what I hope this book will do, is I want to fucking orange pill those guys, because they're the fucking next level.